fans, vampire fans, Dracula fans, and Christopher Lee fans. Rich Vernadeau here, doing a review of the Hammer Dracula films. Now, there were quite a few of them. I'm not going to try to be a completist here and cover all of them, but I'm going to reference many of them, many of which were my favorites growing up as a child, many of which I saw at the theater and on television, later on video and DVD. Most of them are out on VHS and DVD as I understand it. Hammer films are a classic. The first one leading off with Horror of Dracula, starring Christopher Lee in the iconic role of Dracula, and Peter Cushing, of course, as Van Helsing. That one was released in the 50s, 1957 or 58, I believe. Then, following up in the early 60s, Dracula, Prince of Darkness, possibly 65, 66, another installment in the Hammer Dracula series. Taste the Blood of Dracula was another one. Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, with the iconic poster of the girl with the band-aids on her neck. Scars of Dracula was another installment. Taste the Blood of Dracula. And the Satanic Rites of Dracula, which was one of the final ones and one of the strangest ones in many ways. In Satanic Rites of Dracula, Dracula's taking over the world and has developed a virus that will wipe out mankind. One of the more interesting ones, all of them were good, all of them very dramatic. For me, growing up watching these movies in the 60s and 70s, Christopher Lee is the definitive Dracula. I don't think anybody's before or since defines the role of Dracula quite the way Christopher Lee does. And these were fantastic Hammer films. If you haven't seen them, I recommend that you do see them. In future videos, I may do individual reviews of each of the individual films. But this was an overview of the Hammer Dracula films and of Christopher Lee's fantastic portrayal of Dracula. Thank you very much. Now back to my tribute. A man died recently named George Romero. Those of you who are familiar with zombie films from the past 50 years know that he started the whole ball rolling. He is the father of the modern zombie film. Without George Romero, there would not be a Walking Dead that has become such a popular series on TV the past few years. George Romero started the whole ball rolling in 1968 with his small, independently financed film, which he had a hard time distributing. He had to almost be a one-man distribution operation. The iconic Night of the Living Dead. George Romero did that back in 1968. It became a drive-in cult classic, raked in a couple of million within a very short span of time. I believe, if my figures are correct, he did the whole thing on about $100,000, possibly a little more. Definitely a very, very limited budget production-wise. But it became a cult classic, and it remains that today. A few years later, well, a decade later, I should say, the 1979 release of Dawn of the Dead. I'm one of the fortunate people who got to see it on the big screen, Downtown Theater, Elm Street, Majestic Theater, Dallas, Texas, and I saw Dawn of the Dead on, of all days, July 4th, 1979, after having gone down to the Texas School Book Depository in what was then a museum, not nearly the museum that it is now. It's, a big, nice JFK Assassination Museum now, but at that time it was a much smaller operation, but they did have a presentation about the JFK assassination and a replica or a copy of the Mammoth Carcano rifle, which Lee Harvey Oswald is alleged to have used. in the assassination of JFK. Anyway, I got to see all that, and then a few minutes later, a friend and I walked from the Texas School Book Depository down to the Majestic Theater on Elm, where we went in and saw on the big screen Dawn of the Dead, which is the second in Romero's series of zombie films, and definitely impacted me enormously and has continued to be a lasting influence on me in terms of filmmaking, inspiration, cinematographically. Wow, what a big word. Anyway, it's been a filmmaker's dream, an inspiration for me, and I've seen Dawn of the Dead countless times. Me and a group of friends used to go to midnight movies in Dallas and see it. Spring Valley and Coit over in Richardson, there was a movie theater and a shopping center there that had midnight showings of Dawn of the Dead. And then, of course, when it came out on VHS, on video, of course, I had got a copy immediately, and we would have group parties where we would watch Dawn of the Dead. And even today, that original Dawn of the Dead from 1979 is vastly superior to the sequel that was done back in the 2000s, which I was not impressed with. I mean, zombies do not run. Come on, what's with that? The third movie in George Romero's zombie series was Day of the Dead. It did not do as well at the box office as the others, and so it is lesser known. It is an important installment in the series, however, so got to give it credit, and it's very well done, good special effects, Day of the Dead. Then after that, I believe the fourth entry, which he waited a few years to do, is Land of the Dead, which is the big kahuna. It has John Leguizamo in it. It has Dennis Hopper in it. He was using a much larger budget on that one. You know, several million are involved in that. Still fabulous production values. Of course, all of George Romero's work has fantastic production values. And we're going to miss you, George. We miss you, George Romero. Once again, a shout-out to this icon and this great director. And along about that same time, maybe within a year or two afterwards, he did Diary of the Dead, and it's done with more of the handheld camera style that you may be familiar with from Blair Witch and with a few others. Diary of the Dead, not quite up there with the others. Not bad, though. Definitely worth seeing. Anything Romero does is worth seeing. And then Survival of the Dead, which in many ways is one of the most interesting of the series. And I believe Survival of the Dead was Romero's last entry in the series. So that's our shout-out to George Romero. But, I like anything that's action-adventure. My favorite all-time has to be the original Dawn of the Dead, where they land in a mall. 4 surviving humans. They're fighting the zombies who are trying to invade the mall. Then a motorcycle gang shows up. This is George Romero's second installment in his fabulous series of zombie movies. That started the whole Living Dead series, the whole zombie thing that's been going on now for 40 years. George Romero. First was Night of the Living Dead, and then with the follow-up Dawn of the Dead. Now, there is the remake of Dawn of the Dead. Don't care for it. Definitely prefer the original. And again, Dawn of the Dead. This is a shout-out to independent filmmakers in general, of which I am one, and of which my series I alluded to. There's actually 4 different series. The one that has been the longest and that has the most episode right now, most number of episodes, is the one that I'm in the 25th season now, season 25, and that is Crazy Insane Radio, the series. And I just shot episode 508 and 509 the past couple of days. But you want to go back to season 1 and watch it all the way through. Now, there are a number of characters that occur in all the different seasons. And, you know, just like in any other series, there's going to be a character or two killed off here and there, and there's going to be new characters introduced, and various relationships and interactions between the different characters explored. And, you know, I could definitely digress and go on and on about Crazy Insane Radio and have in a number of interviews, which are also available there on YouTube, and the director's commentary and what have you. And I do have these on DVD for anyone who wants to purchase them. Send a check or money order, $9.95 to 218 Bonham Street. And I will send you the 218 Bonham Street, Paris, Texas, 75460. and you can receive each series for $9.95 per DVD. So there's 25 DVDs total if you were to buy all 25 seasons. But you can buy any or all seasons that you would like and follow it. You can also go on YouTube to get a taste of it, to watch it, sample it, watch as many as you want of all the different seasons there on YouTube as well. One of the other series that I've done that has only in the second season right now is a futuristic space series called The Future Hope. It does contain some of the characters from Crazy Insane Radio, so it's a spinoff. Another spinoff that's set in the same city as Crazy Insane Radio, of course, is Murgatroyd After Dark, which follows a lot of the different characters in the series. And the other one is Murgatroyd The Early Years. Now, I really like Murgatroyd The Early Years because I went back and I took a look at a lot of the different characters and showed what they were doing before the main events, the main plot, and the main action in Crazy Insane Radio. So you could call Murgatroyd The Early Years a prequel. That is what it is, a prequel.
Standing in my way. I am not one of those weak, puny, defenseless human females that you like to cut to pieces.
Raging fire at Drifty's hamburger restaurant and yet another blaze at the Super Deluxe Ultra Hotel.
This is a tribute to Texas director Tobe Hooper, who died in the past few days. Most of you are familiar with him and remember him from the iconic Texas Chainsaw Massacre, filmed in 1973, released in 74, a drive-in movie theater hit, filmed on a very, very small budget. Tobe Hooper and some of his buddies near Austin were sitting around playing poker one night and said, hey, let's pool our resources and make a film. And they did. And the rest is history. And there were a series of Texas Chainsaw Massacres, spin-offs, knockoffs, what have you. Tobe Hooper went on to do Poltergeist. He's also known for that. So this video is a tribute to the master work and genius of creator, director, producer Tobe Hooper, who will always remember, he'll always be remembered for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, which has become a modern icon of slasher terror. So this video is in memory of Texas director Tobe Hooper. All of Tobe Hooper's major films are out on VHS and DVD and are probably available online on Netflix, and portions, if not the entire movie, are available, of course, on YouTube. There will also be a number of good documentaries, director commentaries and extras out there available, and a lot of other good videos about Tobe Hooper right here on YouTube as well.
found and watched an excellent episode of Rod Serling's The Night Gallery. I believe it's a season 2 episode. It's called Tell David, and it stars Sandra Dee. In this particular episode, a young woman who's very jealous, who fights a lot with her husband, is in this blue station wagon. What she believes is a storm hits. She arrives lost at the home, which turns out to be the future home 20 years in the future of her son. Anyhow, the woman lets her in. Various electronic devices are shown, which are futuristic, including a very early version of what we would now recognize as being MapQuest. And I do want to recommend this episode that you find it and watch it. I found it on Share TV. I had to Google search to locate it. At any rate, I recommend it strongly, and I don't want to give away too much about the episode. The part of it that I find most interesting is the prediction back then. This episode was made in 1971, of commonplace modern concepts and devices in technology that we now take for commonplace. And of course, the main one that I want to talk about is the MapQuest or Google device, in which I alluded to earlier, which the young man had developed. Fascinating episode, interestingly predictive of the future and of future technology. The date's a little off in that June 7th, 1989 is the date mentioned in terms of the futuristic pack of cigarettes that Sandra Dee has obtained during her visit there to the future. But if you research this, and even from personal memory, I first started net surfing in 1997. That's when I first got online, and MapQuest was very much in existence by that time, if I recall correctly. Definitely by the early 2000s, Google Maps was in existence. So they didn't miss by much. They were possibly a decade early in the writer and prop designer in their prediction of future devices and concepts as far as technology goes. So once again, this episode was written by David Jewell, and it's an excellent episode. Want to recommend it strongly. Again, Night Quest, Tell David, starring Sandra Dee. Dark shadows in pop culture. Rich Vernadeau here. Today I'm going to be discussing and analyzing the massive impact and influence that dark shadows had on pop culture. As any of you know who are fans of Dark Shadows, 1966 to 1971, a Dan Curtis production, and most of you have memories. This is a baby boomer thing, maybe even an older Generation X thing, running home from school to watch Dark Shadows. And it was wonderful. It was a daily Gothic soap opera, as all of you know. Fabulous storylines, fabulous timelines, time travel. Barnabas Collins, the time-traveling vampire. Quentin Collins, a werewolf. The 1897 timeline. All of this was fantastic stuff. And then later on, of course, and more recently, there was the movie with Johnny Depp, Dark Shadows. But we're looking at the original series here and its impact on... and this wonderful Gothic soap opera, which aired every day, fueled the imagination of its viewers with these wonderful things, such as vampires, werewolves, zombies, time travel, etc. And there were all sorts of products, marketing that spun off of this. There was a hit top 40 song, Shadows of the Night, written by a Colbert who was associated with Dark Shadows. In fact, Quentin performed it with the Victrola there. There's a voiceover of Quentin. There were episodes of Dark Shadows in which Shadows of the Night was featured. Then it was released, of course, as a 45, and then it was on the soundtrack album, which was released, which had wonderful music from Dark Shadows. Comic books came out about Dark Shadows. Viewmaster slides. It became a big cultural thing. There were posters of Jonathan Frid as Barnabas and David Selby as Quentin. All of these things there was a game, a Dark Shadows game. So it had lasting cultural impact, and of course, reran. It went through the syndicate, the syndication, and was on stations throughout the 80s and 90s, and then of course Sci-Fi showed it. A couple episodes a day for a long time. Then it was released by MPI, first on VHS and DVD. So we're looking at the pop cultural influence of Dark Shadows. Thank you. This has been Rich Vernadeau.
A house of high fashion, a dazzling whirl of elegance, of exotic, extravagant beauties. An adventurous journey into the devastating allure of the most sophisticated women and their intimate secrets.
Suddenly, these lace curtains ignite a drama that will lacerate your emotions.
Greetings, viewers. This is a Rich Vernadeau movie review, and tonight we are reviewing Blood and Black Lace by Mario Bava, the Italian director. It is a classic in its own right. It is one of the formative, influencing films in the giallo genre, which is the Italian thriller slasher type genre. It is the inspiration, prototype, and forefather of the coming slasher flicks which dominated the 80s. It is one of the first body count movies. Mario Bava used a lot of black and a lot of red in this. He uses a lot of stark color. It stars Cameron Mitchell and Eva Bartok. It is highly regarded and was an influential film upon Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino. It was released in Italy in 1964 and then came out in theaters in the United States in 1965. Was released on DVD in the mid-2000s, and in 2015 it came out on Blu-ray. So, anybody out there who hasn't seen Blood and Black Lace, you owe it to yourself to see this classic thriller slasher Mario Bava giallo, a wonderful slasher flick, and enjoy fantastic film. And that is my
A
review
house of
Blood
high
and Black
fashion,
Lace.
a dazzling whirl of elegance, of exotic, extravagant beauties. An adventurous journey into the devastating allure of the most sophisticated women and their intimate secrets.
Suddenly, these lace curtains ignite a drama that will lacerate your emotions. Blood and Black Lace. Who is this shrouded, sadistic, sordid fiend who maims and murders? Why this bloodthirsty orgy, this holocaust of lives? Blood and Black Lace in bleeding color. A shattering, shivering, shocking experience.
Welcome to Movie Reviews by Rich Vernadeau, and this time I am reviewing the Arthur Penn 1967 Bonnie and Clyde, starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. Of course, it's considered a groundbreaking landmark film. It was one of the first films of what they refer to as the New Hollywood era. It broke many cinematic taboos at the time. One of the things which made it so popular with the younger audience was explicit violence, and the fact that it depicted gunshot wounds in a more graphic way than movies previously had. Of course, its success prompted many other filmmakers to continue this trend in presenting more graphic violence and sex in their films. The film's ending is iconic, of course, and is probably one of the bloodiest death scenes in cinematic history. In fact, it's been called that. It did receive Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actress, Estelle Parsons, Best Cinematography, Burnett Guffey. It's one of the first films, in the first 100 at least, selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. Now, it had an interesting history. Prior to the final incarnation that we're all familiar with, the now classic, iconic film, the script went through a few hands. It was influenced by French New Wave writers, David Newman, Robert Benton. It went on over to Arthur Penn, who was involved in a movie called The Chase at the time. It was sent to Francois Truffaut, the famous French New Wave director, who at that time went on to make Fahrenheit 451. But Truffaut got Jean-Luc Godard interested, and Godard didn't really trust Hollywood, and that ended up not working out, even though Warren Beatty at one point talked to him, had a meeting with him, as a matter of fact. So after it was offered to Sidney Pollack, who turned it down, among other directors, Arthur Penn finally took the director's position, and of course the rest is history. Now, among the actresses who were considered for the role of Bonnie Parker, of course we know that Faye Dunaway ultimately ended up with it, but Shirley MacLaine was, which of course is Beatty's sister. Shirley MacLaine was considered. Jane Fonda was considered. Tuesday Well, Leslie Caron, and Margaret, Carol Lindley, and even Natalie Wood was suggested to play the role, but Wood declined. She was at the time involved in other pursuits. So Faye Dunaway won by the skin of her teeth, as she says in her own words. It is an iconic film. It is a lasting film. I saw it as a child. My parents took me to the drive-in theater to see it, and of course my dad had been born and was of an age where he remembered Bonnie and Clyde from his childhood, and even the way they were ambushed over there. And shortly after that, he brought me a reproduction of the original newspaper that came out at the time that showed their bullet-ridden corpses, lurid black and white photographs of their bodies, and of course of the car, which had hundreds of bullet holes in it. And of course that ending, which is also one of the most iconic death scenes in American movie history, is unforgettable. So this has been my review of the iconic movie Bonnie and Clyde, directed by Arthur Penn, starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. Thank you very much.
Oh man, depression got me down. I'm the brokest man in town. And I've gone from riches.
The original 1960 Psycho, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, immortal classic. Tony Perkins as Norman Bates at the Bates Motel. Janet Leigh as Marion Crane. What can you say? Suspense classic based on Robert Bloch's book. It has stood the test of time. There was a 90s color remake by Gus Van Sant, of course. But the immortal classic will always be the original Psycho by Hitchcock. Master of suspense. The shower scene alone has endless cuts, endless editing. There were a lot of different angles. He went into that. There was a young woman who was a substitute for Janet Leigh in part of the filming of the shower scene, because there were certain nude scenes that Janet Leigh was not comfortable with. So Marley, and I'm going to do something on her, Marley Renfro, who does have a book out and she does go to conventions, was the stand-in. The stunt woman, shall we say, who did parts of the shower scene during the filming, parts that Janet Leigh wouldn't do. All of that notwithstanding, for many years after Psycho, Janet Leigh herself was afraid to take a shower and preferred to take a bath instead. And this was true of a number of women, including my mom. When she saw the movie when it first came out, she was afraid to take a shower after that. And a number of different women had that same response. It hit a visceral nerve in audiences across the nation. And a few years later, when it made a comeback through the theaters, through the drive-in theaters, when I was a child. My parents took me, and the shower scene initially scared me so bad as a 4 or 5 year old. I had to cover my eyes up during parts of the shower scene. But the movie stays with you. It has become a cult classic. As I grew up, it became one of my favorite films as an adult. So if you haven't seen the original Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, I strongly recommend it. Cannot give it too many superlatives. It ranks up there in the top 10 movies, as far as I'm concerned, of all time. And this has been Rich Vernadeau with a review of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Rich Vernadeau here, and today I'm doing a review of Alfred Hitchcock's iconic film, The Birds. First of all, The Birds is based on a story, a novelette, from about a decade earlier by Daphne du Maurier. But Evan Hunter, of the Ed McBain fame, is the one who actually did the screenplay. And there is a book out called Hitchin' Me, in which Evan Hunter talks about his collaboration with Hitchcock and their working together and the mutual respect they had for one another. And it's interesting in its own right. It's called Hitchin' Me by Evan Hunter. Now, Evan Hunter was coming out of fame for his novel The Blackboard Jungle, as well as his 87th Precinct Ed McBain novels. And as this was developed, Hitchcock wanted to do something very artistic. Now, he was coming off of the heels of the huge blockbuster success of Psycho, and he wanted to do something artistic. So The Birds is an attempt by Hitchcock at high art, and he entered it into the Cannes Film Festival, but it did not make the final ballot in terms of the films that competed in the 1963 Cannes Film Festival. Wonderful cast: Rod Taylor, Tippi Hedren, Suzanne Pleshette, and Jessica Tandy. It takes place in the fictional California town of Bodega Bay, and the reason that the birds are attacking is never explained, and Hitchcock did that on purpose. Hitchcock did that deliberately. It features some of the best cinematography and best camera work that Hitchcock ever did. Some of the most interesting camera effects and special effects for the time were incorporated into the making of The Birds. A lot of the bird effects, the flying bird effects attacking people, were done at Walt Disney Studios by animator technician Ub Iwerks. And they used something called a sodium vapor process, or yellow screen. And that's an interesting process for special effects in and of itself. It's considered one of Hitchcock's greatest works. It ranks critically and in popular appeal very high and all over the place. It was honored by the American Film Institute as the 7th greatest thriller. Bravo awarded it the 96th spot on the 100th scariest movie moments. One particular scene out of it where the birds attack the town. So overall, it is a winning Hitchcock combination: suspense, thrills, action, special effects. If you haven't seen The Birds, go see it. It remains one of Alfred Hitchcock's iconic works. And this has been a review of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds by Rich Vernadeau. Thank you very much. Rich Vernadeau with movie reviews, and tonight I am doing a review of King Kong vs. Godzilla. It is a 1962 Japanese science fiction film. I'll tell you a couple of personal anecdotes about it a little later on in the show. It was produced and distributed by Toho. It's the third film in the Godzilla franchise. It's the first time both characters, King Kong and Godzilla, appeared in film in color and widescreen. Directed by Ishiro Honda. It was released in the United States in 1963. And the thing to remember about a movie like this is some movies are just plain fun. They're meant for entertainment. They're meant to appeal to the youth audience. They're meant to appeal to the imagination of anyone who's young at heart. And in fact, one of my anecdotes has to do with that very thing. When I was, 6 or 7 years old, they showed this movie, King Kong vs. Godzilla, on a Friday night on KTV Channel 11 out of Dallas. And this was a tradition. Every Friday night they usually showed a scary movie or a thriller. They did the same thing on Saturday nights. Channel 12 KXII, Sherman Denison used to have a shock theater, and they'd play all the old Universal movies, The Mummy and Bride of Frankenstein and all of that. And that was on Saturday night. But Friday night, KTVT aired this, King Kong vs. Godzilla, and I watched it as a child and, of course, was quite riveted by it. And, of course, it would have been fun, of course, to see it at the theater as well on the big screen. Mount Fuji is one of the scenes. Some of it was filmed on an island right off of Japan. A lot of the movie itself was filmed there. There was a fairly, for that time period, a fairly healthy budget was spent on the movie. And of course it's since gone through release on VHS, release on DVD, and of course it's been reissued with better clarity and high definition. And of course there's another one coming out now. There's going to be a new one coming out now that King Kong and Godzilla are both popular again, and remakes have been done in the past few years. Well, of course they have to remake King Kong vs. Godzilla, and that's going to be hitting the theaters very soon. So again, you approach these movies from the idea of having a good time. This is fun. Get a great big tub of popcorn and a Coke. You're there for the fun, for the entertainment. It's a big slugfest between two gargantuans. It is the battle of the ages, the battle of the titans, King Kong versus Godzilla, and that's my review. And this has been Rich Vernadeau reviewing King Kong versus Godzilla. By Rich Vernadeau. I'm reviewing Horror of Dracula, the Hammer classic from 1958. This was the first pairing of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing as mortal enemies, with Peter Cushing playing Dr. Van Helsing, and of course in the iconic role of Dracula, Christopher Lee. There were a series of films after that, and I've done another review that deals with them. Hammer Films Review, and you should also watch it as well. This was classic in so many ways. It's Terence Fisher. Fabulous score, fabulous music. Even that score was released on LP album during the 60s and was available. This movie made it through all the major theaters and, of course, drive-in theaters. One of the reviews that I have seen talks about the audience having a visceral reaction, a gasping at the death scene, when the sunlight strikes Dracula. Iconic in so many ways and so many levels, wonderful special effects for its time. And it stays true. It goes back to the original Bram Stoker source material and the whole Jonathan Harker diary thing. Fabulously done, well done. Many consider it the best of the Christopher Lee Dracula movies, and it's a movie that if you haven't seen, you owe it to yourself to definitely go see it. Many other Dracula films pale by comparison, and I strongly recommend Horror of Dracula, a Hammer film with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Thank you. This has been Rich Vernadeau with Movie Reviews by Rich Vernadeau. By Rich Vernadeau. Today we are reviewing Frankenstein Meets the Space Monster. Definitely a grade B movie. This movie was originally released in 1965, and it has become a bit of a cult film in spite of being a grade B. Stars Marilyn Hanold, James Karen, Lou Cattell. Filmed in Florida and Puerto Rico. It underwent many different name changes. It's also known as Mars Attacks Puerto Rico, Mars Invades Puerto Rico, and Operation San Juan. Didn't come out on DVD until 2006. Initially released in the United States on a double bill with Curse of the Voodoo. Despite the title, neither Dr. Frankenstein nor the Frankenstein monster ever appear anywhere in the film. Now, a lot of stock footage was used in filming this. It was filmed on a budget of $60,000, and it was released on 8mm and Super 8 in the late 60s, back when people had movie projectors, right before VCRs came out in the mid-70s. So this is definitely one of those you just eat popcorn and drink a Coke with. It's a fun movie, not scary at all, minimal special effects, because what can you do on a $60,000 budget? There is a neat little rock song in there that's kind of, 60s sounding, Herman's Hermits, Beatles-ish type sounding, and they play it a lot when two of the main characters are riding around on a motorcycle. So,
America's
watch it,
missile light
enjoy it.
mission. Your eyes, hear, witness. Total terror.
By Rich Vernadeau. This time I'm reviewing Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which is the fourth installment of the original series. An Arthur P. Jacobs production with Don Murray as Governor Breck, Harry Rhodes as his assistant, McDonald, and Culp is played by Severn Darden. Ricardo Montalban as, of course, the circus owner who has raised Caesar from a baby, the talking chimpanzee left by Cornelius and Zira at the circus before they were killed in the prequel to this movie, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which I also recommend. This was filmed in part at various locations that were evocative of the recent Watts riots. Some of the styling of the battle between the humans and the apes is done deliberately in newscast style footage to evoke the recent Watts riots. It is a classic confrontation between a subjugated slave race, in this case the enslaved apes, and their human masters. It's an exploration of this. I consider it one of the best of the original Apes series film, and of course Roddy McDowall in the leading role of Caesar. And I strongly recommend this film. So if you haven't seen it before, Go out and rent it on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, whatever the case may be. Watch it on Netflix. Watch it however you want to watch it. It's available in many different formats, of course. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. And this has been Rich Vernadeau. Thank you.
You've come a long way, baby, to get where you got to today.
Virginia Slims. This is the taste for today's woman, with rich Virginia flavor you'll like. Tailored slim for your hands, for your lips.
You've got Virginia Slims now, baby. You've come a long, long way. You've come a long way, baby, to get where you got to. Virginia Slims now, baby. You've come a long, long way.
Mr. Cochetti, I am a very patient man, and I feel, Mr. Cochetti, that the best thing that we can do. Wipe that smile off your face, Frank Cochetti.
Well, as I'm sure all of you know by now, we lost an iconic, historic comedian who was a major contribution to comedy in the United States, in film, for 60, 70 years. He started out with Dean Martin, and those of you who might remember that comedy routine back in, I believe it was the 50s probably, and there were a lot of movies then. Of course, he was every year on the telethon.
Right.
The muscular dystrophy telethon. The man would stay up all night long. People would call in and pledge donations. A number of his movies are available on VHS and DVD. A number of them are shown on television from time to time. I believe the original Nutty Professor was a Jerry Lewis. And you can Google all the names of the different movies that Jerry Lewis was in, which were numerous. Jerry Lewis enjoys enormous popularity in France. He's always been one of the favorite comedians of the French. And so we want to remember Jerry Lewis. If you've got some movies of Jerry Lewis, put them on, watch them. They'll remain funny. They'll stay good forever. They're classic comedy. And again, remembering Jerry Lewis.
Stay, be nice, stay.
Hey, Dean, could I get a piece of fruit?
You'll eat later.
I'm hungry now.
Be hungry later.
I'll forget.
I'll remind you.
Based on the novel The Werewolf of Paris by Guy Endore, Curse of the Werewolf is a 1961 Hammer Films production release starring Oliver Reed in the lead role.
A baby who grew into a man possessed by a monster.
Fantastic for its time, great special effects, one of the banner werewolf movies. Clifford Evans, Yvonne Romaine, Catherine Feller also star in this classic Hammer horror film, directed by Terence Fisher, who also did most of the Dracula films, which starred Christopher Lee. great villainess, Diane Ballard, played by Sophia Landon Geyer, on Guiding Light from 1978 to 1981. Unfortunately, this character, Diane Ballard, got killed off. Of course, she had a lot of enemies, and there were a lot of reasons to kill her off. But because a certain storyline is out on DVD now for Guiding Light aficionados, I'm not going to tell you here in this video who killed Diane Ballard. The focus of this video is simply on what an awesome and supreme villainess she was. During that time period, from 78 till 81, she is second only to the immortal Roger Thorpe, played by Michael Zaslow. Any Guiding Light fan remembers that Diane Ballard slept with everybody, blackmailed everybody, and in the end had lots and lots of enemies, including the great Alan Spaulding of Spaulding Enterprises, whom she was trying to blackmail with some cassette tapes. And to see that storyline, watch a series of videos there on YouTube called Machinations that covers the whole storyline leading up to Diane Ballard's murder. Fantastic character, and by the way, she's a great actress, Sophia Landon Geyer. She's also been in Another World and a couple of other soap operas besides Guiding Light, but her starring role of all time, to me, the lead villainess of Guiding Light, at least for that time period, none other than Diane Ballard, played by Sophia Landon Geyer. So, Guiding Light fans out there, pull out the VHS tapes, pull out the DVDs, or get on YouTube and watch the wonderful selections of this woman in operation. This is the ultimate soap opera villainess. This has been Rich Vernadeau. Thank you very much. Vernadeau here with a tribute to Harry Dean Stanton, a very prolific actor who was in many movies and TV shows. I'll read off a few of his credits in a minute. He died yesterday at the age of 91. He was in the iconic film Paris, Texas, and I had the pleasure of meeting the director, William Winders, briefly. That's a whole different story, and I'll do an episode about that at some point. Harry Dean Stanton was in Alien. He was in The Avengers. He was in The Green Mile. His credits go on and on. A long, successful career, both in movies and television. The TV series Alice. He was in that, mini-series. The Good Life. His credits go on and on. If you take a look at IMDb, it's amazing. Of course, many people remember him for Pretty in Pink with Molly Ringwald, an all-time classic. He was even in episodes of Laverne and Shirley, the TV series. Private Benjamin, Escape from New York. The man has an illustrious catalog of screen appearances. And so this tribute to Harry Dean Stanton, who has passed away at the age of 91. Thank you very much.
unbelievably terrifying experience. But you must see all this for yourself, if you're brave enough. You'll never forget the creature without a head, controlled by an insane artificial brain. When you see the most shocking screen experience of them all, Beast of Blood.
Blood on Satan's Claw and The Beast in the Cellar, together in a chill-filled festival of horror. Both films rated R.
Now everything was ready. Who would
You've lost the urge to experiment.